Welcome back to the podcast. Luke, I want to ask you this personal question. So brace yourself. Do you have a need to see a sense of progress in your life? This is a tricky one. A lot of people want to feel like they're progressing.
Yeah, massively.
It can be in a career sense. It may be broader than that. Maybe financial, right? Even if this was something that was in your thinking earlier in life, more than now, it'd be interesting to think about, and I'll answer too.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah, I would say definitely. I don't know when I became more conscious about it, but definitely I learned early on that if you start making progress towards sort of a worthwhile goal or something you're consciously choosing, you can derive a lot of pleasure from it, I've found. And over the years, it can be good. It can be good and bad in a way because you get tunnel vision, and also sometimes we've talked about this in the podcast, but you get blinded by that feeling of making progress without reflecting on why you're making progress or what is it coming together for example.
I like that.
But definitely when I look at the areas of my life, I'm pretty conscious about the fact that I want to be making progress in career, finances, all those sort of buckets.
Is it always an easy? I imagine it's not. So it's maybe a loaded question. How difficult is it determining what progress looks like?
It's very domain dependent, which is strict. So, for example, from a career perspective, it's easy to get that's why I like sales.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to know. Well, it's good and bad again, because you can sort of, if you're only striving to hit a number, you forget why you're trying to hit that number or what maybe mission you're trying to accomplish. But that is very black and white. You can say, okay, I've achieved X amount of dollars this month. But
Yeah.
when it's service based and you don't get a lot of feedback, it's it could be difficult, because how do you know what you're doing is paying off, sort of thing. So it's very domain dependent,
Yeah. I
at
think
least from my perspective.
I wanted to unpack the concept of progress because, again, I'm thinking about someone listening to this and why would they care about the context of the episode around Ken Robinson, who we introduced yesterday, and the concept of like linear paths aren't real. Linearity is an illusion. And why does that matter? For myself, progress is a funny concept. I less and less think about it in terms of financial, really, not too much. I don't think of finances in terms of like progress. I think of it more as like make plans so that without it consuming your life, the financial base is trending up over time.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I don't not consciously derive that much meaning or satisfaction from it. It's always nice to see it going up, and that's about it. It's like, good, cool. There's more there than there was last week. And then, maybe progress. I think a sense of mission and progress on the mission is incredibly rewarding. And personally, I feel like that trumps other forms of progress that usually dominate a 20-year-old male's, someone in their 20s as a male's like thinking. I definitely used to focus more on like, do I have a relationship yet? Do I have, are things moving along for me? Am I becoming a bigger deal as a person in other people's eyes? Am I going to get somewhere in my 20s? And then you unpack that, and that fucking means nothing. So, I don't think this is a new concept we're talking about today, like the challenging the idea of a linear career path, a linear life. And what does that mean? That's the whole idea that there's a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, 5, 6, like that you can, I know exactly what I'll do. And there's all these rungs to climb. And then being seduced by that, you're going to just do that, then you'll do that, then you'll do that. Normally so you can end up somewhere. The classic, obviously, not to pick on this pathway, it still can be something people enjoy and works for them. But the climbing the ladder approach has typically been very presented as a linear thing. Go get a degree, then you qualify for a graduate job, then you can try and get successive promotions to the glorious role of CEO. People might have enjoyed a lower position than being CEO. Many people do. So it's like that's the idea, right? And then so it's easy to challenge that because that happens a lot these days. A lot of people challenging it. So I thought, why is it interesting? Well, it's interesting because I thought we'd go deeper. Why do people actually seek the linear?
You want my response? Okay, sorry.
Oh, you can fill
Yeah,
the space for sure.
yeah. Well, it's familiar in a way. It's easy to
Familiar?
see
Why?
that as an
Yep.
example and
Yes.
assume that that might make you happy.
Yes. Yeah. I was also thinking about that idea of progress.
Mm,
It feels like I'll do this thing and I'll feel a sense of progress because momentum is very seductive. And I'm not a neuroscientist, but I think this has a lot to do with dopamine.
yep.
So I want to read a couple of quotes from Robinson's book, Out of Our Minds,
Hmm.
and then we can just unpack them for the rest of the episode.
Yep.
Life is not linear. When you follow your own true north, you create new opportunities, meet different people, have different experiences, and create a different life. And so I think we've used that idea of true north before in terms of like true north, like a map,
Yep.
instead of following all the paths other people have made.
We're trying
It's a
to
good it's a
define.
it's a good visualization of it.
Mm,
And the new opportunities, different people, different experiences create different. In other words, you're unique. Second one, education is not a linear process of preparation for the future. Well, I think it is trying to be, but it shouldn't be, I think is more accurate. It is about cultivating the talents and sensibilities through which we can live our best lives in the present, and create the best futures for us all.
mm.
Emphasis on live our best lives in the present and create the best futures for us all.
Wow. So it's simultaneous thinking about
The
now, appreciating.
simultaneous now, but also the future.
It's a great
Not
way to put
forget
it.
the now, focus on the future, forget the future, the now. That leads to a lot of pleasure treadmill living. All right, keep going. For most people, this was so true when we did A10 and Lost. For most people, there has never been a direct linear progression from education to planned career. Luke studied IT, and then he did not go directly into IT for 10 years. He's hop, skipped, and jumped, so have I. That's two from this podcast. Our lives are too buffeted by the currents and cross currents of social forces and personal impulse. It's inhuman to follow one track. And yeah, and then he makes other points about innovation. He says, like, Steve Gates, that's our friend's dad, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, that's where the Steve came in. I don't know if our friend's Callum Gates' dad is maybe he's the love child of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, but probably, I don't know, maybe not. Love you, Steve, if you're listening, but you're probably not listening. Alan Wozniak, or the Apple, Microsoft crew, they paved the way for Google, etc., without being able to predict it. Right? They accelerated the accessibility of computer technology. They made it. They domesticated it so people could have software and hardware like computers, like we're on computers now. Largely, a big reason is because of those four people and their companies and the people who supported them. And because they did that first, the Google guys, I forget all their names, came together and were like, oh, we can now create this search engine. Now that everyone's got computers, there's enough people to activate this network. But they didn't really know what they were laying the foundations for. Yeah, obviously Google, the search engine, and Google's the dominant one, is a layer of innovation in society. So on the biggest level, we can't move technology forward in a linear way. Innovation actually, that's the way innovation actually works. And yeah, it's just very powerful kind of quotes unpacking and disassembling that. So it's like basically education operates on this linear assumption though. Does that make sense when I say that education works on this
Yeah. Yeah. I
linear
guess
assumption?
the way I'm thinking about it, at least, is it's very structured in the sense that there's a curriculum, and then you complete the curriculum, and then you graduate, or then you're on to the next thing, and then
Yeah.
once. So it's
The Alan
like,
Watts. The Alan Watts there. And then you're on to the next thing and the next thing. And then you're selling insurance.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, here are all the steps you got to follow. And I guess a very simple idea. It's just not necessarily for everyone. So the takeaways for this episode, for me, in reflecting on this beforehand, if you don't think your life is linear, then don't enroll yourself into linear systems and then complain about feeling 6 out of 10 life, frustrated, angst, and don't internalize that there's problems with you. Because we're kind of forced to endure and go through things that are non-linear.
I think everyone, if they tracked back, this is just like if you track back where you, how you got to this place, like if you just thought about the steps, you won't, it'll be very difficult to actually think back to when you planned before how you got there. Like this is a bunch of random events that kept happening.
I always do that with the 1,000 Doors. To demonstrate the concept, I always go to someone, how did we end up having this conversation? And I would say that to you right now, Luke. Right? How did we plan to actually end up on this? You know, you helping me with the podcast. We were high school friends first, and then years later, and then it's just completely non-linear. We're having a conversation one day, and I said, "Oh, you should probably help me out a bit with this. You'd be good." And there was no plan. There was no formula.
It's like 6 months ago. Oh yeah, I reckon if I do this, I'll be into podcasting. Or exactly. It happened like in like 2 weeks basically, or a week, and then you're just like,
that's what he said. We're impulsive. Yeah, and so the important thing is, like, if you're keeping things too linear, you can't compound, which is probably a conversation for another time. I don't want to throw too much into one day, but yeah, it's.
But what do you think about this? So if you're keeping it linear, what about if things change in terms of what you enjoy, or what? Like then you have to ignore that, right?
Oh, they naturally will. Yeah, well, exactly. And it's suppressing a lot of your actual humanity, which I don't. It's not advisable. So that's, to me, that's the fascinating thing.
Yeah.
Then right, so that's the first part, and then he's got a lot of gold in that book. Tomorrow we're going to ask the question, like, what period are we actually being educated for then? And it's probably closer to 1950 or something like that, if I think about it, but we'll have to see tomorrow. So that's the start of the Ken Robinson series. We'll be back again another episode tomorrow. Remember to jump on the Dorman newsletter. Just sign up at the link below in the show notes at withjoeeby.com/everything-joe. And looking forward to tomorrow.